Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the quiet, dust-mote-filled air of a place you'd never expect to become a crime scene, a small-town public library. Imagine the scent of aging paper, the soft shuffle of feet on linoleum, and the hushed reverence for the written word. Now, picture that silence being shattered not by a shout, but by the unnervingly focused stare of a police dog who has just found something deeply, terribly wrong. This is one of those stories that burrows under your skin, a slow burn mystery that starts with a flicker of confusion and builds to an inferno of questions. And a word of warning, you probably shouldn't be listening to this alone. The shadows in your room might start looking a little more interesting by the end. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support is what keeps these late night sessions going. Drop me a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see our community scattered across the globe, all tuned into the same dark tale. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's a Tuesday afternoon at the Oak Haven Public Library, and the big event is Community Outreach Week. The centerpiece of today's festivities is Officer Miller and his K-9 partner, Buster. You're picturing a stoic German shepherd, all teeth and muscle, right? That's the Hollywood version. Buster is a 5-year-old golden retriever, a fluffy, perpetually smiling goofball whose primary function is disarming the public, especially kids. He's an explosives detection dog, but his specialty is soft target locations, like schools, transit hubs, and, well, libraries. The demonstration is going perfectly. A small crowd of kids and their parents sit cross-legged on the floor of the children's section as Miller hides a training pouch, a small canvas bag containing a chemically inert but scent-matched pseudo-explosive, behind the copy of Goodnight Moon. Buster, on command, zips around the brightly colored shelves, his tail wagging like a metronome on high speed, before he triumphantly sits in front of the correct shelf, nudging the book with his nose. The kids applaud. Miller gives Buster a treat. It's charming, a Rockwell painting come to life. To wrap up, Miller decides to do a casual sweep of the main library, mostly to show the parents how Buster works in a larger, more complex environment. He unclips the long lead. "Okay, buddy, seek," he says, his voice relaxed. Buster trots off, weaving through the empty study carrels, his nails making a soft click, click, click on the polished floor. The head librarian, a stern-looking woman in her late 60s named Eleanor Albright, watches with a thin, vaguely tolerant smile. This is all unnecessary disruption, a box to be checked. But then something shifts. As Buster rounds the corner into the 900s, the history and geography section, his entire demeanor changes. The happy-go-lucky trot slows to a stalking crawl. His tail, once a fluffy banner of joy, becomes a rigid pointer. Miller feels the change instantly, a familiar cold prickle on the back of his neck. He's seen this look 1,000 times in training, but almost never in the wild. Buster isn't playing anymore. He's working. If the dog ignores a backpack left carelessly by a chair, he ignores a half-eaten bag of chips peeking out of a trash can. He moves with a singular purpose towards a tall, dark blue book with faded gold lettering. It's an unassuming volume, The Pioneers of Miller's Creek, a local history. Then he performs his trained alert. It's not a bark. It's not aggressive. It's far more chilling. He sits, perfectly still, his eyes locked on the book, his body as rigid as a statue. It's a passive alert designed to avoid disturbing a potential explosive device. This is the first ironic twist of the day. The friendly, fluffy dog, the star of a community meet and greet, has just triggered a bomb threat protocol. He tries to coax him away. "Okay, good boy, let's go." But Buster doesn't budge. He just stares. This is the moment where procedure smashes through the pleasantries of the afternoon. Legally, a K-9's trained alert establishes probable cause. While most case law, like the famous Florida versus Harris Supreme Court decision, deals with vehicle searches, the principle extends. A certified dog's alert in a public space gives law enforcement the authority to investigate. He can't ignore it. He can't write it off as a fluke. This is where the first debate begins. experts still argue over the absolute reliability of scent dogs in cluttered, contaminated environments. A library is a symphony of weird smells. Old paper breaking down releases nitrates. Bookbinding glues contain volatile organic compounds. And the cleaning polish used on the shelves could, in theory, contain chemicals that a dog might mistake for an explosive component. But Buster isn't any dog. He's trained to isolate the specific scent profiles of gunpowder, C4, TNT, and their chemical cousins, and to ignore everything else. To him, the target scent is a beacon in a fog of background noise. Miss Albright walks over, her thin smile replaced with a frown of genuine concern. "Is everything all right, officer?" Miller doesn't look at her. His eyes are on the book. "Ma'am, I need you to calmly and quietly evacuate the building. Tell everyone the demonstration is over and the library is closing early for technical reasons." The second twist lands with the weight of a coffin lid. The alert isn't on a person or a bag that someone brought in. It's on the library's own property, a book that has likely sat on that shelf for decades. The very idea is absurd. Yet Buster remains, a furry, four-legged harbinger of chaos. The evacuation is swift and surprisingly quiet, a hushed exodus of confused parents and disappointed children. Within 10 minutes, the Oak Haven Public Library is empty, save for Miller, Buster, and Miss Albright, who refuses to leave. "I'm responsible for this building," she says, her arms crossed, a portrait of defiant bureaucracy. Miller doesn't have time to argue. He radios it in. The call goes out, and per standard procedure for any potential explosive, the county bomb squad is dispatched. They arrive 20 minutes later, not with sirens, but with a quiet, lethal efficiency. The final bizarre image of the hour is this: two technicians in heavy blast suits, their movements slow and deliberate, entering the hallowed silence of the library. They approach the shelf not as a piece of furniture, but as a potential threat. They carefully remove the book, The Pioneers of Miller's Creek, and place it on a portable containment table in the center of the room, as if it were an unholy artifact. The air is thick with the unspoken question that hangs heavier than any threat of explosion. Why? Why would a bomb dog on a friendly Tuesday afternoon alert on a dusty old history book?
The world outside the Oak Haven Public Library holds its breath, but inside, time has slowed to the crawl of a bomb-diffusing robot that isn't even here. The two technicians, encased in their bulky green suits, communicate in clipped, muffled tones. They use a portable X-ray scanner, a device that looks like an oversized staple gun, to peer inside the book without opening it. On a small tablet, a ghostly grayscale image appears. They study it for a long, silent moment. Officer Miller stands by the main desk, with Buster now sitting calmly at his feet, blissfully unaware of the chaos he's unleashed. Miller feels a bead of sweat trace a path down his temple. If this is a false alarm, his and Buster's reputation is going to take a serious hit. Then, one of the technicians gives a thumbs up. "Clear." His voice crackles through the comms. No power source, no initiator, no explosive mass. It's not a device. The collective tension in the room doesn't so much break as it transforms. The sharp, immediate fear of an explosion evaporates, leaving behind a thick fog of pure confusion. The lead technician carefully removes his helmet, revealing a man who looks more like a high school science teacher than a bomb expert. "But," he adds, tapping the screen, "it's not a normal book either. There's a cavity. It's been hollowed out." This is the point where the investigation pivots. The bomb squad's job is done. A new team arrives, Detective Harding and a forensics specialist. Harding is a man in his late 40s, with a tired face that suggests he's seen too many strange things to be surprised by anything, yet he still manages to look faintly disappointed by humanity on a regular basis. He thanks the bomb squad, dismisses a still flustered Officer Miller, and turns his full attention to the book, now sitting innocently on the evidence table. The first order of business is the meticulous, almost sacred ritual of securing the chain of custody. This is a critical legal procedure. Every single person who handles this book from this moment forward will be logged. The book is photographed from every angle. It's placed in a large, clear evidence bag. A tag is filled out with the date, time, location, case number, and Harding's signature. Any mistake here, any undocumented moment, and the defense attorney could later argue the evidence was tampered with, potentially getting it thrown out of court. The entire case could crumble before it even begins. With the formalities complete, Harding, now wearing thin nitrile gloves, carefully removes the book from the bag. He opens the cover. The first 20 pages are normal. Then, his fingers find it, a perfectly rectangular hole cut through the center of the remaining 200 pages. The work is neat, precise, done by a patient hand. It's an old-school stash pot. Tucked inside the cavity are two items. The first is a vintage brass lighter, a Zippo-style flip-top, its surface worn smooth with time and touch. There are no engravings, no initials, it's completely anonymous. This is the day's odd, unsettling detail. Not drugs, not a weapon, not a key, a lighter. An object whose sole purpose is to create fire. Harding flicks the cap open. There's no fluid, but the flint is still there, worn down to a nub. He snaps it shut with a metallic click that sounds unnaturally loud in the silent library. The second item is a single piece of paper folded into a tight square. It's old, yellowed, and brittle at the creases. The forensic specialist, a young woman named Chen, uses a pair of tweezers to unfold it under a portable lamp. On the paper is a list, handwritten in a tidy, slightly slanted cursive. It's not a list of names or addresses, it's a list of dates. 6 of them, spanning a period of 4 years from over 30 decades ago. No context, no explanation, just the month, day, and year. June 12, 1988, October 3, 1989, November 21, 1989, May 5, 1991, July 18, 1992, August 1, 1992. Harding stares at the list. It feels less like a clue and more like a riddle from the past. This is where the first twist lands, soft as dust. The bomb thread is gone, replaced by an esoteric puzzle from the past. A hollow book, an old lighter, and a cryptic set of dates. The initial report from the lab comes back a few hours later, delivering the second, more ironic twist. The trace amounts of gunpowder that Buster alerted on, they came from the lighter, specifically from the repeated striking of the ferrocerium flint. Modern double-base gunpowder and old-school lighter flints share a key chemical family, nitrates. Buster's nose is so exquisitely tuned that he'd picked up on the faint, decades-old residue clinging to the book's pages from the lighter stashed inside. He wasn't wrong. He was just so right that he was completely wrong about the context. The entire library lockdown, the bomb squad, the palpable fear was all triggered by a Zippo. This brings up a fascinating, if obscure, legal debate. Evidence spoliation by necessity. A defense attorney could theoretically argue that the bomb squad's initial handling of the book, moving it, x-raying it, constituted a form of contamination or alteration of the evidence before it was properly processed by forensics. Experts still argue about where the line is drawn. In a case like this, public safety protocols would almost certainly override the concern and the argument would fail. But in a different context, where the threat was less clear, the actions taken to neutralize a perceived danger could inadvertently jeopardize the prosecution of the actual crime. The final twist of this section unfolds as Harding stands in the empty library, long after the forensics team has packed up. He holds the bagged book in his hand, looking at the title again. The Pioneers of Miller's Creek, a dry, forgotten local history. He looks over at Miss Albright, who has been hovering nearby, a hawk guarding her nest. "This book," he says, his voice flat. "It has a checkout card, right?" She nods stiffly. "Of course, inside the back cover." Harding had already seen it. The card was pristine. It was a newer, barcoded card, inserted when the library digitized its system 15 years ago. But behind it was the old one, the classic paper card and pocket. It was completely, utterly blank. In the 50-plus years the library had owned this book, Not a single person had ever officially checked it out. The secret it held had been sitting on the shelf, untouched and waiting for decades.
Detective Harding feels the weight of the last few hours settle on him like the fine layer of dust covering the less popular sections of the library. A case that started with the high adrenaline threat of an explosive has now devolved into something far quieter and in some ways more unnerving. It's like searching for a lion and finding a snake. The danger is different, less overt, but it's there, coiled in the past. He turns his attention back to the head librarian, Eleanor Albright, who has maintained her post near the circulation desk with the unblinking vigilance of a gargoyle. Ms. Albright, Harding begins, his tone carefully neutral. He knows that librarians are the keepers of a kingdom of information, and getting them on your side is crucial. They're walking, talking search engines with an ingrained sense of order and a memory for the misplaced. A book that's never been checked out in 50 years. Is that common? She adjusts her glasses, a small defensive gesture. Not common, no, but not unheard of. Some of our local history collection is specialized, more for in-house research. It was donated by the author's estate in the late 60s. Her voice is crisp, professional, but Harding detects a flicker of something else beneath the surface. It's not fear. It's a kind of weary resignation, as if she always knew one of her books would cause trouble eventually. He presses gently. So anyone could have accessed it. Taken it off the shelf, sat with it, put it back? Of course, she replies. This is a public library, detective, not a high-security archive. There is a faint, almost imperceptible sarcasm in her tone. This is the first ironic turn of their conversation. The woman in charge of a building dedicated to open access is now being forced to see that very openness as a security flaw. He holds up the evidence bag containing the book. We found this inside. A list of dates from the late 80s and early 1990s. He watches her face for any reaction, any spark of recognition. He gets nothing. Her expression is a locked door. Do these dates mean anything to you? She peers at the list through the plastic. No, I was working in the city library system then. I didn't transfer here until 2002. It's a perfect alibi and a polite dead end all in one. But Harding has a feeling she's not telling him everything. It's a cop's instinct, that nagging sense that the answers are close, but hidden behind the wall of procedure and professional discretion. I need a list, Harding says. A list of anyone who might have a particular interest in local history. Regulars, researchers, anyone who spends a lot of time back in that section. This is where he hits the legal and ethical wall of library science. For over a century, libraries in the United States have fiercely defended patron privacy. This principle was famously tested after 9/11 with the controversial Section 215 of the Patriot Act, which allowed the FBI to obtain library records with a secret court order. The American Library Association fought back hard, and the public outcry led to significant amendments. Even today, law enforcement can't just walk in and demand patron records without a warrant. It's a hot-button issue, a constant tension between security and intellectual freedom. Ms. Albright is clearly a staunch defender of that freedom. Her back stiffens. I can't give you records, detective. Patron privacy is sacrosanct. I would need a subpoena. And even then, our digital system only tracks current checkouts and holds. We don't keep a history of who looks at what inside the library. We are not in the business of surveillance. He knew this was coming. He wasn't after official records. He was after unofficial ones. The ones stored in Ms. Albright's head. I'm not asking for records, Eleanor. I'm asking for your help. A K-9 just flagged one of your books for containing gunpowder residue. I have a hollowed-out book, a lighter, and a cryptic list of dates. This isn't about overdue fines. Something bad happened that's connected to this book and that list. Help me figure this out before I have to come back with the warrants for everything, including your staff schedules and security footage for the last month. It's a bluff, but a good one. He's offering her the chance to be a helpful citizen instead of a compelled witness. Her calm finally cracks, just a little. A sigh escapes her lips. She looks around the empty, silent library, her domain. The quiet is no longer peaceful. It's eerie. There is one person, she says, her voice dropping, as if she's confessing a secret.
He doesn't have a library card, never checks anything out. He comes in 2, maybe 3 times a week, always in the afternoon. What's he do? He reads, only in the local history section. He brings his own notebook. He's elderly, quiet, keeps to himself. The description is vague, but it's a start. What's his name? We don't know. We call him Mr. Hemlock because of the book he's always reading. This is the day's truly odd detail. It's a nickname straight out of a cozy mystery novel. The Hemlock book? Harding asks, confused. No, not a book about Hemlock, she clarifies. A book by Hemlock, a different local historian. His name is Arthur Hemlock. The book is called Oak Haven's Forgotten Roads. It's right next to the one you found. He sits with that book for hours. Harding feels a jolt of electricity. It's the first solid lead he's had. Does he handle other books? Sometimes, she admits. He'll pull a few off the shelf for context, I suppose. He might make a note, then put them right back. I've seen him with The Pioneers of Miller's Creek before. Not often, but I have seen him with it. The second twist lands right there. The quiet, reclusive patron has a direct connection to the evidence. Harding gets a physical description: tall, stooped, walks with a slight limp, always wears a worn tweed jacket, even in warm weather. He thanks Ms. Albright, whose relief at having unburdened herself is palpable. As Harding turns to leave, she adds one more thing. There's something else, Detective. He has a strange habit. Before he opens a book, any book, he taps the cover 3 times. Always 3 times. Then he opens it. Harding stops. Why? I don't know. A superstition, perhaps, a habit, but he does it every single time. Tap, 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 then he opens it. The final, unsettling piece of the puzzle clicks into place. A man who obsessively reads local history. A man who focuses on the shelf where the hollow book was found. A man with a peculiar, ritualistic habit. Harding pictures this elderly man sitting alone in the dusty stacks, tapping the cover of a book that holds a lighter and a secret list of dates. Is he the one who put them there? Or is he, like Harding, just another person trying to read the secrets of the past? The library is no longer just a crime scene. It's a stage, and Harding has just been introduced to one of its most mysterious actors. He now has a suspect, or at least a person of interest, and he knows exactly where to find him.
2 days pass. 2 days of background work that feels like trying to assemble a jigsaw puzzle using only the blue pieces of sky. Harding and a small team dive into the digital rabbit hole of Oak Haven's history, trying to find any significance to the 6 dates from the list. They cross-reference them with old police reports, fire department logs, and digitized newspaper archives. Nothing. The dates are ghost, marking days where, according to official records, absolutely nothing of note happened in the Tri-County area. No major crimes, no fatal accidents, no noteworthy civic events. It's a string of dead ends that only deepens the mystery. Harding knows that eyewitnesses are better than databases. He decides to stake out the library. It feels a little ridiculous sitting in an unmarked sedan across the street, watching people return copies of the latest bestseller. It's a far cry from the high-stakes world of television detectives, but this is the reality of police work. Long stretches of tedium, punctuated by brief moments of action. On the 3rd day, his patience pays off. At precisely 2:15 p.m., a man matching Ms. Albright's description gets off the city bus. He's tall, but stooped, his shoulders hunched forward as if carrying an invisible weight. He wears a faded tweed jacket, despite the mild autumn sun, and he walks with a slow, deliberate gait, his left leg dragging just slightly. This is Mr. Hemlock. Harding lets him get inside the library before following, giving him a few minutes to settle in. He finds him exactly where Miss Albright said he would be, in the quietest corner of the local history section. The old man is sitting at a small wooden table, a single book open in front of him. Oak Haven's Forgotten Roads. A spiral notebook and a pen are placed neatly beside it. Harding approaches slowly, his footsteps muffled by the worn carpet. "Arthur Hemlock?" Harding says, keeping his voice low. The old man looks up, his eyes a pale, watery blue. They hold a flicker of surprise, but not alarm. He looks more wary than scared.
"I'm not Arthur Hemlock," he says, his voice a dry rustle of leaves. "He's been dead for 40 years. I just enjoy his work." "My name is Detective Harding," he says, holding out his badge. "I need to ask you a few questions about another book from this section." The old man's gaze shifts to the empty space on the shelf where the Pioneers of Miller's Creek used to be. A flicker of something, recognition, disappointment, crosses his face before it's gone. This is the first small tell, the crack in the facade. "I saw on the news," the man said quietly, "about the dog. Caused quite a stir." "We have reason to believe you've handled that book recently," Harding states, watching him closely. The man doesn't deny it. He nods slowly. "I have, many times over the years. My name is Samuel Gable, and I can tell you exactly why there might be gunpowder in it." Harding feels a surge of adrenaline. This is it, a confession right here in the stacks. But what comes next isn't a confession, it's a story, and a damn good one. This is the first major twist. Gable offers up a plausible, detailed, and completely misleading explanation. "That book," Gable begins, his voice taking on the cadence of an old storyteller, "is tied to one of this town's ugliest secrets, a land feud between the Millers and the Abernathys, going back to the founding of the town. The Millers owned the creek and the lumber mill. The Abernathys owned the quarry. They hated each other for 100 years. He explains that in the 1950s, the feud escalated. Barns were burned, livestock mysteriously died, threats were exchanged in the dead of night. It was a local, low-grade war. According to Gable, a young man from the Abernathy clan, a hothead named Elias, hollowed out that very book as a place to hide things from his family. Not a bomb, but his personal effects, things he didn't want his domineering father to find. The lighter belonged to him. Gable claims that Elias was also a passionate duck hunter, and he would often reload his own shotgun shells. The theory is that trace amounts of gunpowder from his hands must have contaminated the book and the lighter. It's a perfect, self-contained story. It explains the hollow book, the lighter, and the gunpowder. The story is compelling, rich with local lore and historical detail. It feels true. This is where real-life criminal events, the historical prevalence of violent family feuds in rural America, like the infamous Hatfield-McCoy rivalry, lends Gable's tale an air of authenticity. These feuds were real, they were violent, and they were often rooted in disputes over land and resources, just like he described. Harding listens patiently. "And the list of dates?" he asked when Gable was finished. Gable hesitates for just a second too long. "Dates? I don't know anything about any dates." It's a clumsy lie, a stark contrast to the fluid, confident narrative he just spun. This is the day's most unusual detail, the sheer craftsmanship of the lie. Gable isn't just some confused old man. He's an architect of narratives. He's built a fortress of a story around the truth, with historical buttresses and compelling characters. He's trying to redirect the investigation, to send Harding down a historical rabbit hole that leads to nowhere. "Mr. Gable," Harding says, hardening his voice slightly, "forensics is very good these days. We can lift prints from paper, even paper that's 30 years old. We can test the ink. It's only a matter of time." Gable's composure finally breaks. His shoulders slump, the storyteller's confidence draining away, replaced by the deep-seated weariness Harding first saw in his eyes. "The feud was real," he insists, his voice dropping to a whisper. "All that part was true. But Elias Abernathy, he died in Korea. He never came back. He had nothing to do with that book." This is the second twist. Gable's perfect story has a fatal flaw, one he knew about all along. He was testing Harding, seeing if he'd buy the easy answer. The legal debate that arises here is subtle but crucial, the use of deceptive interrogation techniques. Harding's claim about lifting prints from 30-year-old paper is an exaggeration, a bluff. While possible in perfect conditions, it's extremely difficult. Courts, including in landmark cases like Frazier versus Cupp, have consistently upheld the right of police to lie and use trickery during interrogations, as long as it doesn't cross the line into coercion that would make a confession involuntary. Harding is walking that line, using a bluff about forensic capabilities to corner his suspect. The final twist comes as Harding presses him. "So why, Mr. Gable? Why the elaborate story? What are those dates?" Gable looks down at his hands, at the wrinkles and veins that map out a life of 80 years. He speaks softly. "They're a memorial. for things that were lost, things that burned. He finally looks up, his watery eyes locking with Harding's. The feud is the reason, but it wasn't the Millers and the Abernathys. It was someone else. The dates? They're the fires. Suddenly, the investigation is ripped from the dusty pages of a local feud and thrown into the heart of a far more sinister crime: arson. The lighter in the book is no longer just a lighter. It's a symbol, and the quiet, reclusive historian isn't a suspect anymore. He's something else.
A single word hangs in the air of the library's quietest corner: fires. It changes everything. Detective Harding feels the tumblers of the case click into a new, more menacing alignment. The elaborate, misleading story about the family feud wasn't a lie to cover Gable's guilt. It was a wall built to protect a painful truth. The lighter wasn't a nostalgic keepsake, it was a totem. The book wasn't a random hiding place, it was a secret vault for a private grief. Harding leans in, his voice softer now, less like an interrogator and more like a confessor. "Tell me about the fires, Samuel." Gable takes a slow, shaky breath. "They weren't in the papers," he says, his voice raspy. "Not as crimes, anyway. An old fishing shack on Miller's Creek, a hunting cabin deep in the woods, an abandoned barn on the old Abernathy property, a contractor's shed. Small structures, isolated. No one was ever hurt." Harding's mind races back to the dead-end search. He and his team were looking for reported arsons, for major events that would trigger an official investigation. They found nothing, because they were looking for the wrong thing. These weren't crimes that made headlines. They were incidents that would have been logged as accidents, electrical faults, or acts of vandalism by teenagers. This is the first ironic twist of this new revelation. The fires were hidden in plain sight, dismissed and forgotten by everyone, except the person who set them and the person who watched them burn. The dates on that list, Harding prods gently. They mark the fires. "Every one," Gable confirms. He points a trembling finger at the notebook on the table. "I have the locations, the details. I've spent years piecing it together, cross-referencing weather reports, town records, trying to prove they weren't accidents." Harding now understands the old man's obsession. Mr. Hemlock wasn't just a history buff. He was a private, one-man cold case squad. The library was his office, and the local history section was his database. He was hunting a ghost. This scenario brings up a fascinating real-world criminal phenomenon: the serial arsonist who operates below the radar. The FBI's National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime has extensive profiles on these offenders. Many aren't the wild-eyed pyromaniacs of popular culture. They're often meticulous, patient, and criminally sophisticated. They choose low-value, isolated targets to avoid attracting major law enforcement attention. Their motive is rarely profit. It's usually a complex psychological cocktail of power, excitement, and revenge. The fires Gable describes fit this profile perfectly. It was a pattern of destruction so subtle it was never even recognized as a pattern. "Why the book?" Harding asks. "Why hide the list and the lighter in there?" "It was his," Gable says, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The arsonist. I saw him with it once, long ago, at a town picnic, the summer of '88. He was sitting under a tree, reading it. The Pioneers of Miller's Creek. I never forgot that." This is the second, more chilling twist. The book wasn't just a container, it was a link, a personal item belonging to the arsonist, claimed by Gable as a piece of evidence, a symbolic trophy. He had, in his own way, stolen the arsonist's story and made it his own. "Who was he?" Harding asks, the question feeling heavy, final. He hesitates, a lifetime of silence warring with the need to finally speak. His name was Franklin Roth. He was the town's fire chief. The absurdity of it is almost comical. The man in charge of putting out fires was the one secretly setting them. It's a classic, almost cliché case of the fox guarding the henhouse, but it's also tragically common.
The U.S. Fire Administration has documented hundreds of cases of firefighter arson. The motives vary: hero complex, boredom, a desire to exert control. But the betrayal is always the same. Experts still debate the psychology behind it. Is it a deep-seated pyromania that draws them to the profession? Or does the profession itself, the constant exposure to fire and its power, somehow corrupt a vulnerable mind? Franklin Roth died 10 years ago, Harding says, already knowing the answer. He'd seen the name during his initial research. Roth was a celebrated local figure, a man who had served the town for 40 years. I know, Gable says, a deep sadness in his voice. He took his secrets with him. I kept the book, the lighter. It was my proof, my evidence. But it was no good. Who would believe an old man over a town hero? So I just kept watch. I kept the record. The case has been turned completely inside out. The crime isn't a bomb threat in a library. It's a series of unsolved arsons from 30 years ago. The suspect is dead. The only evidence is a list of dates and a lighter held in a secret ledger by a man who was the arsonist's only witness. It's a case that is, for all intents and purposes, legally closed by death. But then Harding remembers the catalyst for this whole affair: the K-9 alert, the discovery of the book. Someone else knows about this book, Samuel. Someone moved it. Someone touched that lighter recently. That's why the dog hit on it. It wasn't you, was it? Gable shakes his head slowly. No, I haven't opened it in years. I just check on it, make sure it's still there. The tapping, he says, finally explaining his odd ritual. I tap the spine. If it sounds solid, I know the contents are still inside. I don't need to open it. The final twist lands with the force of a fresh revelation. The mystery isn't about the past anymore. It's about the present. Franklin Roth may be dead, but his secret is not. Someone else has found the book. Someone else has opened it. Someone else has handled the lighter. The cold case has just gone hot. Who, Samuel? Harding presses. Who else knew Roth's secret? Gable looks up, his eyes filled with a new, immediate fear. No one. No one should have known. Unless, oh God, his family. He had a son, a grandson.
The atmosphere in the library has shifted once more. It's no longer a crime scene or a historical archive. It's a confessional. Samuel Gable, the self-appointed chronicler of a dead man's sins, now looks like a man who has accidentally unlocked a door he'd long since bricked over. The past isn't just a story anymore. It's reaching into the present with hands that are still warm. A grandson, Harding repeats, the words feeling sharp and dangerous. What's his name? Daniel, Gable whispers. Daniel Roth. He's in his late 20s, I suppose. I see him around town sometimes. He has his grandfather's eyes. The detail is delivered with a shudder, as if Gable can see the ghost of the fire chief looking back at him from a younger face. Harding's mind is a whirlwind of connections. The chain of events is suddenly, terrifyingly clear. Franklin Roth, the arsonist fire chief, dies a decade ago. His secret ledger, the hollowed-out history book, sits dormant on a library shelf. Samuel Gable, the sole witness, keeps a silent, ritualistic vigil. Then someone else, Daniel, must have discovered the truth. But how? How would the grandson know about this book, Harding asks, already guessing the answer. Franklin was a meticulous man, Gable explains, his voice shaky. He kept journals, detailed records of his life, his career, a town hero's autobiography, you know? After he died, his wife donated all his papers to the library for the local history collection. She thought she was preserving his legacy. This is the first gut-wrenching irony. In an act of love and remembrance, Roth's widow unwittingly provided the roadmap to a secret shame. It's a perfect, tragic loop. Harding can picture it. Daniel Roth, perhaps wanting to connect with the grandfather he idolized, starts digging through his old journals. He finds a cryptic reference, a mention of the pioneers of Miller's Creek, a clue so subtle it would mean nothing to anyone else. He comes to the library, finds the book, and discovers the hollow cavity. He finds the lighter and the list of dates.
He finds the proof that his heroic grandfather was a monster. When did the library get these journals? Harding asks. Miss Albright, who has been hovering just out of earshot but now is drawn in by the gravity of the conversation, steps forward. She says, "About 2 months ago," her voice is tight. "We've been slowly cataloging them. They're in the archives, not accessible to the public yet." "Not officially anyway," Harding counters, "but a family member, the grandson of the man who wrote them, asking for a private look. You'd probably allow that, wouldn't you?" Miss Albright gives a small, pained nod. "Yes, we would. Daniel Roth was here about a month ago. He spent the whole afternoon with his grandfather's papers." The timeline snaps into place. Daniel finds the clue, finds the book, and opens it. His fingerprints, fresh and new, are now all over that lighter, reactivating the faint gunpowder scent just enough for a dog like Buster to notice. This is the solution to the central mystery, the answer to the why now question that's been bothering Harding from the start. This revelation brings up the odd detail of this section, the generational transfer of guilt. Daniel Roth is now burdened with a crime he didn't commit. The law has a name for this, not for the guilt, but for the knowledge. Misprision of a felony. It's a federal crime and some states have similar statutes, making it illegal to conceal knowledge of a felony. Although never prosecuted, it exists for situations just like this. Daniel, by not coming forward, is technically committing a crime. He's trapped between protecting his family's name and obeying the law. "What happened, Samuel?" Harding says, turning his attention back to Gable. "You were there. You were a witness." Gable's story finally pours out. No more feuds, no more misdirection. It's the raw, unvarnished truth he's held inside for over 30 years. This is the second twist. His role in the story is not what we or Harding assumed. "I was just a boy," he says, his gaze distant, lost in the past. "Not a boy, a teenager. My father and I, we didn't get along. I used to sneak out at night, camp in the woods to get away from him. That's how I saw the first one. The old fishing shack. I was hidden in the trees, not 50 yards away. I saw him, Franklin Roth. He wasn't in uniform. He just looked like any other man. He used a lighter, just like the one in the book, to set a small pile of oil-soaked rags ablaze. Then he just watched it. For a long time. The way he looked, it wasn't angry, it was peaceful. Like he was admiring a painting. The description is chilling. It perfectly matches the psychological profile of a certain type of arsonist, the one who craves a feeling of serene power and control. "I was terrified," Gable continues. "He was a fire chief, a respected man. I was a troubled kid with a bad reputation. Who would they believe? So I said nothing. But I started watching him. I figured out his pattern. He only did it after long dry spells. He chose places that were forgotten, worthless. I saw him set 3 of the 6 fires with my own eyes. The others I just knew. The dates, the locations, they fit." So Samuel Gable wasn't just a passive observer or a private investigator. He was a direct, albeit silent, eyewitness. He was a child who saw a monster and was too afraid to scream. His obsession, his decades spent in the library wasn't about solving a crime. It was about validating a trauma that no one else knew he had. This is where the unresolved legal theory comes into play. Experts still argue about the statute of limitations for various crimes, especially when new evidence emerges decades later. For a crime like arson, most states have a statute of limitations, often less than 10 years, unless a death occurred. Since Franklin Roth is dead, he can't be prosecuted. But what if he were alive? Could Gable's testimony, corroborated by the discovery of the book, be enough to bring a case against an elderly man for crimes committed 30 years ago? Some would argue that justice has an expiration date, while others would contend that for serious felonies, the clock should never run out. It's a debate with no easy answer. The final crucial twist of this section comes from Harding's intuition. Daniel found the book. What would a young man do finding his hero grandfather was an arsonist? Harding thinks aloud. Would he expose him or would he try to understand him? He looks at Gable. Has anything else happened? Recently? Gable's face turns pale, his voice barely audible. "Last week, the old groundskeeper's shed at the edge of the public park. It burned down. The fire department said it was faulty wiring." Harding feels a cold dread wash over him. "It wasn't faulty wiring, was it, Samuel?" Gable just shakes his head, his eyes wide with the horrible, dawning realization. Daniel Roth didn't just discover his grandfather's secret, he inherited it. The fires have started again.
The silence that descends upon the local history section is heavier than ever before. It's the silence of a story that has finally caught up to its own tragic ending. The sins of the grandfather are being visited upon the grandson, not as a curse, but as a calling. Daniel Roth isn't just covering for a dead man, he's continuing his work. The hollow book has become a playbook, the lighter, a torch being passed to a new generation. Harding looks from Gable's terrified face to Miss Albright's stunned expression. The library, a sanctuary of knowledge, has become the epicenter of a multi-generational criminal legacy. He pulls out his phone and makes a call, his voice low but firm. Get a team to Daniel Roth's address, now. He's a material witness in the library incident, but this is an active arson investigation. Approach with caution. While he waits for confirmation, Harding pieces together the final fragments of the psychological puzzle. This isn't the simple copycat crime. It's something more complex, more twisted. Daniel grew up in the shadow of a local hero, a man celebrated for his bravery and civic duty. Discovering the truth wouldn't just be disappointing, it would be world-shattering. It would invalidate his entire perception of his family, his identity, and his grandfather's love. This is the first, deeply disturbing twist of the final act. Daniel isn't motivated by pyromania, but by a warped sense of filial piety. He's not trying to be his grandfather, he's trying to understand him. By replicating the fires, he's engaging in a grotesque form of communion with the dead, trying to feel what Franklin felt, to see the world through the eyes of the man he revered. Harding's team moves fast. 2 patrol cars arrive at Daniel Roth's apartment above a hardware store on Main Street. They find him sitting in a sparsely furnished living room, the blinds drawn. He doesn't resist. He doesn't seem surprised. He's been waiting. On his coffee table is a map of Oak Haven, the kind you get at the Tourist Information Center. Next to it is a red marker. 6 locations are circled, matching the deets on Samuel Gable's list. A 7th circle is drawn around the groundskeeper's shed at the park. An 8th circle, freshly inked, is around the old boathouse at the public beach. That was meant to be next. The real-life legal event that comes into play here is the concept of a search incident to a lawful arrest. When the officers take Daniel into custody, the map on the coffee table is in plain view. Under the plain view doctrine established in cases like Harris versus United States, police can legally seize evidence of a crime without a warrant if it's immediately apparent and they are lawfully in a position to observe it. The map, with its incriminating circles, is a prosecutor's dream. It's a clear indication of premeditation, a physical manifestation of Daniel's descent into his grandfather's obsession. Back at the station, the interrogation is short. Daniel Roth is not a hardened criminal. He's a lost, deeply troubled young man. He confesses everything, his voice a monotone, detached from the horror of his own words. He tells them about finding the journals, the cryptic reference, and the book in the library. I just wanted to know why, he repeated, over and over. He was a good man. He saved people. I didn't understand how he could also be this. I thought if I did what he did, if I saw what he saw, I could finally understand him. This confession brings up the day's oddest detail. The motive is not destruction, but connection. He wasn't trying to burn the town down. He was trying to rebuild his image of his grandfather. In his mind, these small, controlled fires were a way of reconciling the 2 opposing sides of Franklin Roth, the hero and the arsonist. He believed that by walking in his grandfather's footsteps, he could find the way to forgive him, to make sense of the senseless. It's a bizarre, tragic form of therapy through criminal reenactment. The final ironic twist of the case comes from Samuel Gable. Harding finds him still at the library, sitting in the same chair, looking frail and exhausted. The weight of his 30-year secret has now been finally lifted, seemed to have left him hollowed out much like the book that started it all. It's over, Samuel, Harding says, gently. Daniel is in custody, he confessed. Gable nods slowly. Is
Is he like his grandfather? No, Harding says, and he means it. His grandfather was a man who enjoyed the power. Daniel is just a boy lost in his grandfather's shadow. There's a difference. This is where the last unresolved debate of the story lingers. The concept of criminal inheritance or genetic predisposition to crime has been a subject of intense scientific and ethical debate for over a century. Early flawed theories of phrenology and eugenics have given way to more nuanced studies of behavioral genetics. While modern science has found links to certain genetic markers and predispositions to impulsivity or aggression, there is no crying gene. Experts overwhelmingly agree that environment, upbringing, and personal choice are far more significant factors. Daniel Roth's case is a perfect example of this. He wasn't born an arsonist. He was made one by the toxic legacy of a family secret. His crime was not one of nature, but of a deeply misguided nurture. The case is closed. Daniel Roth will face justice for the fire he set and for the ones he planned. The hollow book, The Pioneers of Miller's Creek, sits in an evidence locker, its secrets finally brought into the light. But the original crimes, the 6 fires set by Fire Chief Franklin Roth, remain ghosts. They are forever beyond the reach of the law. Their official cause still listed as accidental in the town's dusty records. The town's hero remains, on paper at least, a hero. Samuel Gable's private ledger is the only place where the full truth is written down, a final, silent chapter to a story the town will never read. The gunpowder has been found, the mystery solved, but the history remains unchanged. And so the quiet of the Oak Haven Public Library returns, the dust settling once more on the shelves of the local history section. The story of Franklin Roth and his tragic legacy will not be found in any of the books there. It exists now only in the sealed pages of a police report, in the memory of a sad old man, and in the troubled mind of a young man who loved his grandfather so much he was willing to become a monster to understand him. It's a chilling reminder that the most dangerous stories aren't always the ones written down. They are the ones we inherit, the ones that flow through our blood and whisper to us from the past, daring us to repeat their mistakes. The case is closed, but the questions it leaves behind will linger in the air for a long, long time. Thank you for joining me on this journey tonight. These stories are more than just tales of crime. They are explorations of the strange, dark corners of human nature. If you found yourself captivated by the quiet suspense of Oak Haven, please consider leaving a like to let me know, and share this story with someone who appreciates a good mystery. Every comment, every share helps our community of late-night truth seekers grow. I'll be back soon with another case, another puzzle waiting to be pieced together in the dark. Until then, keep your eyes open and question everything.